Hello, I am Lisa Walzer, a current co-chair, along with Sloan Springer of the AIA New Jersey Small Firm Exchange, often shortened to AIA NJ SFX. Ruchi Dar, also here, is the SFX NJ rep to the National Small Firm Exchange. Josh Zinder, National SFX board member and former AIA New Jersey president, heard an early version of tonight's presentation and suggested we run it. He has been tremendous in connecting us to interesting speakers. Our mission is to become a resource for small firms. We recently conducted a survey of New Jersey AIA members. Based on the response, we've been putting together programs specifically aimed at those who practice in firms with 10 or less architects on staff. If you'd like to join our committee to help plan future events, please contact Christina Goldstein, our meetings and events manager. Her contact information will be in the chat. We also have a Slack channel open to all New Jersey AIA small firm practitioners. It's a place to ask questions on professional practice, building design and detailing, get referrals for engineers, contractors, and other consultants, etc. In other words, a place to share knowledge and resources and enjoy the company of like-minded professionals. Information on how to join the chat and how to join the Slack channel will also be in the chat. Our speakers tonight are Brian Penschow and Bill Martin, and I don't believe they need a long introduction as they are well known in the AIA and architecture world. Brian is our current AIA New Jersey president. He has his own architecture firm and spec writing company. Bill Martin is on the board of trustees for the Architects League of New Jersey and the chair of the AIA New Jersey Public Relations Committee. He is the principal/owner of WJM Architect. During the presentation, attendees will not be able to be seen or heard by the presenters, but may pose questions using the Q&A feature, which is typically found at the bottom of the screen. After the presentation, Ruchi and Sloan will pose these questions from the Q&A feature to the speakers, and will continue as time permits. We had planned to hold an open SFX forum after the presentation, but due to the overwhelming number of attendees, that won't be practical. Instead, we will hold an open forum another time as either a separate event or after our next webinar. Here's Brian and Bill.
Hello, everybody.
Hello, Bill Martin here.
So these are some of the housekeeping slides. They're typical at the beginning of every CEU presentation. We just got to go through them. This part, I just wanted to mention, we're not here to sell you anything. We're here to give you information, to reduce some of the fears, to increase some of the curiosity about this image generation new tool, this new ability that we have to paint with words. It's really fantastic, and we're going to be able to show you all the new ways that you can really use this and kind of the deep understanding of its math, not magic. Bill, you want to tell us a little bit about the course?
Sure. The course, I'm not going to read the slide, but as Brian said, we are trying to explain this in a way that will kind of alleviate some of the fears. I know there's a lot of fear out there. I've been getting a lot of commentary online and offline about fears about the future of the profession and how this affects it. It's still relatively early in its development, especially the image generation part of this, the way we are going to explain it. So, we're hoping that, this will develop an interest. There's a lot of useful aspects to this. A lot of small firms can make a very good use of this. And that's really what we are trying to do. How we started on this is I started about 10 months ago looking into AI and investigating some of the programs that were out there online on my phone and so forth. And I was doing it for about 4 months independently. And then I ran into Brian, and I found out that Brian was doing the same thing at the same time. So we decided to join forces and kind of pool our resources. Brian's focus is more hyper technical and then the programming side, and my focus is more how do we simplify this so that someone, with a smartphone can use it and make it useful for their practice. And that's how we got started.
So our learning objectives, we would really want to understand what this software is. Is it something that's thinking? Is it something that's going to take over our jobs? Is it what's going on? How did this come about, right? And then we're going to learn some of the limitations, what it can't do, and why those limitations exist in the software. We're going to instruct you a little bit on the ethical use of this and some of the dangers and pitfalls that there are. It's capable of doing some nefarious things that we're already seeing in the news show up. And we want to mention some of those things that are going on. And then we're going to explain some of the strategic uses of this and how we can leverage it to get our ideas out to our clients faster and better in ways that we weren't able to before. We could shorten the amount of time from 2 weeks down to about 2 minutes. And that kind of technological gain cannot be ignored. This is who I am. I'm not going to read the whole slide. I've been involved in AIA for a little bit over a decade actively. I've been a member for longer than that. I've been involved in architecture for about 25 years. I really enjoy what I'm doing now with the spec writing. It's giving me the opportunity to branch into a world of different projects that I never would have been able to work on before. And that's led me to getting more and more experience on different building types, giving me more opportunities to see drawings from across the country, different architects, really understanding some of the ways that I can layer materials and put buildings together better than I did before as just a design architect.
Okay, and this is me. This is my slide. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I am co-chairperson of AIA New Jersey's Public Awareness Committee. I've been involved in the AIA for about 30 years. I've been very active in the last 12 to 13 years, particularly in social media and trying to get the message out to the public, to politicians and journalists, to dispel the stereotypes that we face every day. We're very active here in AIA New Jersey in the public awareness arena, and I feel we have made progress in the last decade or so in dispelling some of those stereotypes. In terms of my practice, I run a small firm. It's a sole proprietorship. I am an architect and a community planner. I focus on sustainable, high-performance, resilient energy efficiency design using essentially cultural vernacular expression. I don't have a particular signature style. I work in all styles. I went to Carnegie Mellon University. I spent 3 years there studying architecture and econ. And then I transferred over to Pratt Institute in New York City, where I got my Bachelor of Architecture degree in 1988. I've been in private practice for 30 years, and I've consulted on a wide variety of building types. The big thing, and the reason why I wanted to get involved in this, for me, I've always been an early adopter of technical advances. I was one of the first architects in New Jersey to have a website back in 1995, very early on. I was also one of the first architects in New Jersey to obtain a Revit license, which I got back in 2002. I've been on Revit for over 20 years. I like the technology. I see the value. What attracts me to the technology is if I see that it's relatively easy to use or easy to learn, and that it can produce value for my firm, then I'm attracted to it and I want to know all about it. And that's when I saw AI and I started to investigate it. I realized that this has tremendous potential to expand the creativity of individual architects as we move forward. And as the technology advances, we do have to be careful, but I do see this as a tremendous tool that many of you can use in your practice. And that's how how Brian and I connected, and that's how I got involved, and that's my background.
And my first question when I really took a deep dive into this image generation is, why would I bother doing this? I'm going to have to invest extra time. I'm going to have to invest some extra money. Is it going to be worth it for me?
Right.
And I really thought back through the years of each technological advance that I've experienced in architecture, going from hand drawing to the CAD programs, the 2D CAD programs, and just using, once we had CAD, I never had to draw anything twice. Just that was a huge technological gain, right? I could copy and I could paste, I could mirror drawings so much faster than just mirroring them on the blueprint machine with the Mylar. There was, each step of the way, we were getting such great technological advances. When BIM came along and I was exposed to Revit, and the Revit guy showed me how he could change the windows from double hung to casement windows. And not only did it change in the plan, and it changed in all the elevations and the sections and the schedule all at once with the click of his fingers, boom, it was done. And I could see the gains, right? They're not just in the time, but in the accuracy. I was so excited about BIM. And this is really the next step in that kind of evolution. Now we're going to, and they aren't integrated fully yet. They've started to integrate AI into Photoshop, and they've started to integrate it into some of the other programs, but it's going to end up fully integrated into the BIM programs, into Photoshop, into other image editing softwares. And you can start to see some of the large language models being integrated into your writing software programs, like Word and other things are using more and more of that technology. It's certainly the search engines. You'd mentioned Bard, Bill, was using that, and they have Microsoft has a Copilot now that's going to be able to help you. It's all AI based. And
Autodesk is talking about integrating AI into Revit. And although AI is not new, it's been, the technology has been in its infancy. It's in your smartphone, it's in your PC. It's suddenly become much more powerful. It's learning at a greater rate. And Brian and I felt that it was worthwhile to put this presentation together so that our colleagues could understand how this stuff works. So as it appears in the software packages that you are using, you will understand what drives it, excuse me, what drives it behind the software, because knowing that is important so that you'll feel more comfortable with it and can adopt it into your workflows, into your creative activities, and so forth.
I just wanted to mention one thing about this term AI. In computer science, they're using the term AI for any program that's based on a neural network. And that neural network is a very large linear algebra matrix. Sometimes it may be 3 dimensions or 4 dimensions deep. It uses tensors, it uses cross products and dot products. It uses cosine to try and find the most likely, the most probable next thing, whether it's a word, whether it's a pixel, whether it's a color. It's using math in a really large way to narrow down, similarly to way our neural network works in our brain, but it's nowhere near the size of a human brain yet. And
it doesn't think the way you think.
It's always deterministic, in a way. If you give it the same inputs and it has the same pre-training, it will always output the same exact thing. Humans are not like that.
Now we're going to get into some of the technical aspects of this.
Right. Right now, there are 3 major engines that are diffusers that are producing image. DALL-E is the first one that was produced by OpenAI. Midjourney is on Discord only. It is fantastic. It does amazing images on Midjourney, but we're going to talk a little bit about some of the limitations of what Midjourney is and what it can and cannot do. And then Stable Diffusion is probably the most powerful and the most ubiquitous one throughout the world. It is the back engine of almost everyone that's online. There are a lot of interfaces that can use this software. It is open source software. That means it's free, it's downloadable, and you can modify it. Anybody can modify it. There's a lot of power with open source. It's the democratization of some of this software. So it's a different way of approaching computer programming as opposed to some of the closed off ones like DALL-E is. DALL-E is related directly with ChatGPT. And if nobody knows what the GPT is in ChatGPT, it's a generative pre-trained transformer. So it's pre-trained on a large data set. So are the image generators pre-trained on large data sets. And they're transformers. They're using that linear algebra to produce something, some kind of output that we're looking for.
Yeah. Now, if I could just expand on that a minute.
Sure.
The what Brian was talking about is the way that the way that the software grabs the information that you're asking it to look at. It does not go out on the entire internet to find images or to find words or things based on how you're using it. It has its own library. It has its pre-trained library that it uses in order to create images and to create text. So it's important to understand that, because if it went out to the entire internet, it would take forever because the internet is just so enormous. So the companies that create these various apps are actually gatekeepers to libraries that they use to operate the apps. It's important to know that, because AI is not all-knowing. It's not omniscient. It doesn't give you everything out there. It gives you a sampling of what's out there. Now, Brian's going to explain how the stable diffusion works.
There is a little bit of concern that those libraries from the internet have images inside of them from copyright violated artists, and the library's holding an image that somebody produced and put their hard work into and didn't give their permission for that image to be used. That is absolutely not the case. Those libraries don't contain any images whatsoever. They were trained on images, but all of the libraries are containing vectors and tensors. It's all math and numbers. There isn't an image that's going to be created from another image. It isn't copied. The images that we're going to use, if we're not using latent space, are going to be our own. We're going to be putting our own sketches in, our own drawings, our own, if we wanted to do that. But it's not necessary to do that. The way this originally started was an idea of how to create an image from words. So the way it works is it starts with a random noise picture, like when the TV was going off in the middle of the night and you just see static noise. They called it the background noise of the universe. You know, they figured that out in the antenna near where I live. That noise then is subtracted because the computer's assuming there's a piece of artwork underneath that noise. So each step of the way, it takes away a little bit of that noise to finally leave the image behind. What do you need to run it? Well, you need a computer, right? This runs on a computer.
It does.
Yeah, you don't need the internet, but you can use the internet. The internet is hosting, if you don't have a computer powerful enough to run it yourself, that's the next best option, is to run it through the internet. There are hosted services for doing it on the internet. You could do it on your phone through the internet. You could set up your own hosted space somewhere on the internet and then set up your own software programs there and run it. One free one that used to be very powerful was Google Colab. Some people were misusing the spaces on Google Colab, so they started charging and restricting the use of these image generators on Google Colab. There's other spaces, like Hugging Face has spaces. There's a few other spots you can set it up. And the reasons I would say to use those if you don't have a powerful enough computer in your office is this runs using a graphics processor rather than a central processing unit. And that's because it's solving partial differential equations, hundreds of thousands of them at a time, and a GPU does everything in parallel while a CPU does it in series, one at a time. So the minimum requirements really to run this is any operating system that is commercially available, usually a graphics card with at least 4 gigabytes of RAM. It's the more VRAM that you have, the faster it's going to be able to produce the images. And having an SSD, solid state drive, is only for being able to load those models, which are about 6 to 7 gigabytes into the memory. The faster the hard drive is, the faster the model loads. The software, there's just some version tracking and some coding language. Python is a coding language. It comes installed with Windows, but most of these are running only on version 3.10.6. Git
Yeah,
is a version tracking one that you just have to install it. But the real thing that you need is having some sort of interface. You can have your own hosted interface like Automatic 1111 or Comfy, or you could use an interface that's been pre-programmed by somebody else on the internet. We have a couple of those to show you as well.
right. And Brian, the bottom line, you flip back a second.
Okay.
The bottom line is you don't really need complicated computers to do this. The computers you have are provided they're maybe a year or two old, are probably already more than adequate to be able to handle this. So I know you heard a lot of technical stuff come out of Brian because he loves that stuff, and I do too. But if you're a novice here and you're wondering about this, the computer you have is most likely already capable of doing this. In fact, your phone is capable of doing this, and we're going to discuss that as well.
This is one of the user interfaces called Automatic 1111. It is super powerful. It's like the first time that I saw Revit and I saw all the tabs and I was like, what is this? Structural, what is this? MEP? Like so many things that I didn't think that I was necessarily going to use. It's the kind of the same way with Automatic 1111. This tool is potentially extremely powerful. And all of these settings can get really, really confusing if you haven't had some sort of education or training on how to do it. I spent months failing over and over and over again with these settings and not understanding why I was failing, and then slowly learning how to get better and better images from these really powerful settings. I don't want you to have to experience failure over and over and over again to get good at this. We want you to jumpstart and get good right away. This is another user interface. It's called Comfy UI. This is where if you're a programmer or have an affinity for programming, it's not like what I learned as programming back in the 80s and 90s, where you had to type in lines of code in either BASIC or Pascal or Fortran or COBOL. This is all node-based programming. So each one of these boxes has a set of code that does something. There's a clip model, which translates the language into an image pair. There's a diffuser, a sampler, which solves all the linear equations that need to be done. There are text prompts that you put in. You don't need to know this stuff either. But if you started to get into this, this is where you can get really, really powerful, and you can customize this at any level that you want to. This is where you probably want to start.
Yeah, excuse me. Okay, now for everyone on here, if you have your phone in your hand, I want you to take your phone out, go to your app store. Okay, now we don't get anything out of this, but I want you to download something to your phone. It will get you started in image generation. There, I'm going to give you two of them because we're not here to plug any one in particular, but these two that I'm going to give you are easy to use. The first one here, if you can see that on the screen, is called Wonder. Okay, and if you go, I don't know if you can see this either. If you go to your app store, look for Wonder, and there's that little purple and blue bean that's their logo, and download that onto your phone. And when you get a chance, open it up. I think they're going to ask you to create a username and a password, and then play around with it. On the right side of the screen, this is actually a screenshot from my phone. You see Wonder down in the second to last row, and next to it you see a W, and it says Dream. That's the other app that I would recommend that you download and install on your phone to get you started. So you should make a note of that now, so that you can do that either later, or you can do it right now while you're listening to our presentation. These phone interfaces are very easy to use. It takes a little time to kind of navigate through the app itself, but they are very easy to use. And we would hope that our colleagues listening would start off with this. It'll give you, it will return images that will really be exciting to you once you get to that point. We're going to explain how to use them as well. But those are the two. The first one is Wonder, and the second one is Dream, and it's by a company called Wombo. We should go to the next slide. Okay, this is the input screen from the Wonder app. And if you look at the top there, it says enter a prompt, and we're going to talk about prompts. Prompts are the words that you enter into the software to tell the software what the images that you want to see are. For instance, if you want to create a house or you want to create an office building, you start with that, and you put in a whole bunch of descriptive comments separated by commas, and you can say an office building, large windows, curtain wall, white, whatever colors you want to use, and you input those prompts. And we're going to go into that a little bit more as we get further along. But that's how you communicate to the software what the image is that you want it to return. All right, you'll also see below where it says enter a prompt, it says add your photo. Another thing you can do with these very simple to use image generators is you can take a sketch that you've done, you can take a photo with your phone, and you can upload the sketch where it says add your photo, and then you can use the prompts, and it will take your sketch and it will use AI and it will modify your sketch in accordance with the prompts, and you can get a wide variety of creative images back. It helps to leverage your personal creativity as an architect. That is a fascinating feature. Both the Wonder and the Dream app, they both do this. The Dream app actually has a slider on it so that you can either have the photo be a limited influence on the data that it returns, or a strong influence on the data that it returns, so you get back information that you can use. As you go below the add your photo on this interface with the Wonder, it says select style. There's both of these apps have preset styles of artwork, such as cartoons, pen and ink, photos. I tend to use the hyper realistic. It returns rendered images of buildings depending on the prompts that you put in. That can be very useful. You can show them to colleagues, you can show them to clients as an idea generator. It's not necessarily going to generate an exact rendering of the exact building you want, but it will help you to go through lots of ideas very quickly. And you can do this on your phone. I do this in the morning when I have my coffee. I pull up the apps, I throw in prompts, based on what I'm going to do that day. Let me see what the software can come back, what kind of ideas I can get. You can then, the images that it returns can then be saved to your gallery, and you can look at them later. And you can use them to help you with your Revit models, to import, the various features that the software has returned. And it's just an incredible creative enhancer for any artist, but in particular architects. Because
another trick I like to use is something I call loopback, where the output that I got from the software, I like to feed back into that add your photo again, so I can refine it further and change it further.
And these apps can do that. Now, after you select your style, you put your prompts in, you have your photo or not, you don't need the photo. You select the style, you have to do that. And then at the bottom there, you see there's a bar that says create. That is what sends the data out, and it will flash for a little bit, and then it will start returning images. The Wonder returns 2 images at a time. You have to slide back and forth between them. The paid version, this is the free version. The paid version is I think it's a $10 a month subscription. I'm subscribing to both of them, so I get a little bit more features than you would get otherwise. But if you're just starting out, put these apps on your phone, play around with them in your spare time, get comfortable with them, because this is the future. Let's
talk a little bit about the limitations of this. return smaller images. Now we've been increasing the size as it goes along. When this first came out in April, there was a Stable Diffusion 1.4 model, and it would only do 512 by 512 pixels. If you tried to print that out on a 40 by 40 presentation board, it's going to look awful. You're just going to have these big chunky pixelated stuff. Since then, they've released a new model, Stable Diffusion XL, and its latent space ends up being 4 times larger. It'll do 1024 by 1024. Now, that doesn't mean you're stuck there. You can upscale these things to 4K or even 8K resolution, much higher. So if you find a piece of art that you've created that you want to present on a large board to a planning board or something and have it printed out, you certainly can upscale it to that level. So for every one of these limitations that we're going to run into this, we've figured out workarounds and solutions to, except for the hands, really. My solution to hands is no hands. You don't want to see hands in this. It still hasn't done it really right. But the other thing I want to talk about is that the data set that it's trained on, each one of those styles that we were mentioning before in the phone app is a different checkpoint model that's been trained on a different style of images. So there's a model that's used for hyperrealism. There's a model that's used for anime style. There's a model that's used for each one. You can download as many of these models as you want and host them yourself. The subscription apps have a fixed set of models that you can choose from, but each model is only trained on what it knows. So if you're asking that anime model to produce realism, it's going to fail. You want to use the right tools for the right thing. So as long as you know what you're looking for, you can pick the right tools.
Explain the hands, Brian.
Oh yeah, it doesn't really understand 5 fingers. It'll give you often a thumb and 5 fingers. It'll fuse hands together. It'll give you 8 fingers on one hand and 3 fingers on another hand. It's very, very confused about the symmetry of the human body. So fingers and toes, it kind of falls down on so far. That's one thing they're working on. They're trying to improve it. There's been lots of ways to try and layer other models on top of it that are just photographs of hands. But it's an issue that, as architects, I don't really care so much about the hands, but it is one of those weaknesses.
Yeah, and it does this also with buildings. It doesn't understand what a hand is. It goes out and it'll diffuse an image of a hand, but it doesn't think about what a hand really is, like, 5 fingers and so forth. So here you see a matrix of images where it's distorted them, it's fused them together, it's cut off fingers and such. It does the same thing with the building. So if you're trying to put prompts in, or you have a sketch and you put that in, depending on the prompts, if it doesn't understand what your prompts are saying, it will return imagery of buildings that don't work in 3-dimensional space. They may have windows where you can't have windows. They may have multiple doors. We're going to show you examples of this, but it's important to understand that the quality of the prompts that you put in the box to describe what you're doing is important to the output that it gives you. So if you're going to play around with these phone apps, it's going to take you a while to get get your hand around, or get a handle on this. You got to try different prompts. Don't get frustrated. Play around with it for a few weeks. It might not even take you a few weeks. Once you realize what you need to do to get the imagery you're looking for, you can expand on that. But one of the things that I will point out is, for instance, Brian and I struggled with trying to create split level configurations in buildings. It didn't know, it doesn't speak like architects. So it doesn't know your archspeak. If you use architectural terms in the prompts, you're probably not going to get back what you want. But we were finally able to figure out the prompting to have, for misaligned levels. It understood misaligned, and it understood levels in a building. So things like that will help. I had a terrible time trying to get it to produce clapboard siding. It didn't know what clapboard was. But strangely enough, it knew what vinyl siding was, which in appearance looks like clapboard siding. So if you use in your prompt vinyl siding instead of clapboard siding, you actually get what you're trying to create. So this is where we're going to start to talk about the prompts as we go through this presentation. So that the prompts and your sketch, you might get garbage back, but don't get frustrated. Eventually, as you get better at it, you're going to get some amazing imagery back. And even the phone apps can scale up. Like Brian was talking about the 512 by 512. Even the phone apps have some features in there where you can control the quality of the image and create high def images. It's just amazing what you can do with your phone. I mean, it's just crazy. Sometimes I think about this.
I want to mention the legal issues.
Yes.
Up until October 23rd, there were court cases that were pending. OpenAI was being sued by several artists that did not give their permission for any images to be used in their training, and they felt as if their style, their personal style, was co-opted without their permission. And the court has thrown that case out so far. It may come back around again, but that has a potential to slow down the progress of this whole medium. Because if we end up going a deep dive into all in on this, that we're using it commercially, and we find out 10 months down the line that we can't and we're stuck, that would be a waste of our time and our talent going that way. I don't think it's going to end up that way, but we want to be aware of the legal issues and just pay attention to, mindful of it as we're going forward. And the last limitation I want to point out, we discovered really kind of recently, is it does not produce exact models or images of stuff very well. I tried to produce Falling Water, which is the most iconic house in America. I figured that there's enough photographs everywhere. It just doesn't do it that well. If you're asking it to do a car model, a specific car model, unless you do a small model that overlays on top of one of those things called a LoRa or a hyper network that's trained on images of that specific car or that specific house or your specific architectural style, you may not be getting back exactly what you want when you're putting in a specific type of thing or a specific house. So it's kind of hard to recreate some of those. It's better at recreating objects than it is at recreating concepts too.
Right. Yeah. The training. Yeah. Here's your Falling Water. The training of the library has images of falling water in it, but they're all from different angles. So what it does is it diffuses them from all different angles into an image that makes some spatial sense, but it doesn't match with what falling water actually is. So you can see in these two images here, it's very falling water-esque, but it's not falling water. And we discovered this only a little while ago.
Yeah.
There's other limitations here. These are some images that I've created. You see the roof lines are a little wonky. It will do that to you. It does understand symmetry. It does understand asymmetry. But when it comes to some of the details, yeah, you see that interesting roof line, which I don't know, that looks kind of cool, but it might not be the greatest thing. And then on the image on the right, you'll notice that around the entrance, some of the detailing, some of the grillage that was used, that was in the Adirondack style there, it wasn't able to fully reproduce a symmetrical and visually correct appearance of that. But the use is, if you get an image like this returned and you like what it's done around the entrance, you can then use this image to go into your Revit software and create what it is that you want in a correct way. So it leverages your creativity, because you could create hundreds of images like that and go through and pick out the things that you like in each one, and then incorporate them into your computer models that in your work that you're doing in your office.
How many front doors do we need?
Yeah. See, 2 front doors. It doesn't know that you only need 1 front door.
A garage door into the living room.
Right. So it creates buildings, and based on the prompts that we gave it, but it returns images that don't really work architecturally, and because it's not an architect, but you are. So
and we've picked these images to show you what goes wrong.
Yeah.
I would say, depending on how good you're at prompting, that's going to adjust how much crap you're going to get versus how much quality you're going to get, right? So it's all in the prompt. The better you are at prompting, the better the product that's returned to you is going to be. The less detailed you are, the less specific you are about what you want and what you don't want, the more you're going to get anomalies that don't really work.
Right. So
That brings us right into the prompt engineering.
Yeah, you have to understand that a lot of what you're going to get back, the images you're going to get back, are not really usable images, but they are there. They will spur your creativity. You'll think of other things based on what you see. Maybe, I don't know, Brian, what do you think about 20%, 25% of the images that come back are really interesting, and the rest of them have flaws in them that you might be able to correct by improving your prompts. Or not, depending on what it is you're asking it to image for you.
There's ways to fix it. The mistakes, other ways to fix it. You could use in painting, where you're masking out the mistakes and then replacing it over and over again until it finally gets it right. So you can keep all of the good stuff and throw away the bad. You don't have to throw the baby out with the bathwater. That's why I save every image I've ever created so far. They're not taking up that much space, and you can host them in the cloud. They may be useful some way. Also, all of the image data that you've used to create the images is tagged in the metadata of the image. So you can recover your prompt and recover your settings from that image by going into the metadata of the image. So that's why I don't like to throw it away. Let's talk a little bit about prompting. There's often in the phone app, there's one box for a prompt. So you have to use what you want to see with positive words and what you don't want to see with negative, like no hands. In some of the more complicated interfaces, you have two boxes, one for a positive prompt where you'll put all of what you want to see, and a box for your negative prompt. Using positive language, you'll put all the things you don't want to see in the negative prompt. So
and those
examples.
Are some of the more complex software. The phone apps don't do that. So if you're trying to input negative prompts into your phone app, just say, for instance, 2-story house, narrow site, no porch, if you don't want the porch, because sometimes it will return a porch when you're not asking it for one. So you can actually use negative terminology in your prompt box in order to help control that. But there's a limited amount of control with some of these phone apps in regards to the negative prompts. Not safe for work, Brian? You want to talk about that?
Oh, yeah. So these models have been trained on a lot of data. Later models, most of the not safe for work stuff has been removed. The first models were trained on something called the Large Ion 5B dataset, which was scraped from 4.8 billion images off of the internet. That's almost all the images on the internet. That includes everything. Recently, that model is no longer available for anybody to use because they found some very inappropriate stuff in it, and they had to take it down. Very inappropriate, illegal stuff. They had to take it down and try and get that stuff out. But other models are trained on private data sets, and the more recent ones have gotten almost all of the not safe for work stuff out. But the early ones that often produce better images because they were trained on a lot more images still have it in there.
And this is why it's important to understand that the libraries that the software goes to create the images, it's limited for a reason.
Yeah. And a lot of that stuff is not just the not safe for work stuff, but there's gore. There's some really dark stuff that people are people, and they've put it on the internet. We have to be careful of what we're using to use it in an ethical way. And despite your best efforts, something may still come up. I'll tell you all a little story. I was trying really hard, like George Lucas, to dirty this stuff up a little bit, right? It was the idea of science fiction get a little schmutz on it. And that's why Star Wars was so successful and made it seem so real, because the stuff was a little rusty and it was a little dented and a little bent. So I was trying to create a diner, a New Jersey diner, that had all this dirt and grease and everything all over it. So I put in the positive prompt, dirty diner. And I got back some stuff that I did not
that you
really,
cannot show.
I cannot show that Yeah, so you just have to be careful, even if you're coming from the best intents, because the words have multiple meanings and the computer doesn't know how to discern the difference between what dirty you want. It can come back with something that you don't know. Now, the vast majority of the images were fine. That was an anomaly, but you definitely don't want to run this in front of a client and say, hey, look, we're going to run 100 images and I'll show you
Right.
what we get. That could pop up. So you have to
Yeah.
be very careful of what's going on and be aware, mindful that these things can happen.
Yeah, do it separately and then show the client. I'll give you another example. I talked about, having difficulty with the split level configuration in a building before, and vinyl siding versus the clapboard siding. A simpler example of the problems with the interpretation of the prompts, as Brian was saying with the dirty diner, is if you input the bark of a tree, you might get an image that shows like the exfoliating bark of a sycamore tree. And then from the same set of prompts, you could get an image that comes back of a dog barking at a tree. It interprets the prompts the same way, but comes back with different imagery based on where it goes to find the images that match the prompts. So that's a simplified example, but that's how, that's another good example of how it doesn't really think. It's not intelligent in the sense the way architects or human beings are intelligent.
These are the three terms for some of the ways that we use to get over on those limitations. In painting is for fixing mistakes. You can also do out painting for increasing the size of the image. So if you were limited, or if you wanted to see more of any of these images up here, you could outpaint it and the AI would fill in the next parts of the image by growing it outward. Upscaling takes the limited pixels, that idea of you can improve on it. And then image to image is what we were talking about before, where you use your own photo. There's a couple of different ways to use your own photo as the latent noise that's going to be the underlying image for the situation. So this is an example of in painting.
Before you
Yeah.
continue with that, just if you want to see an example of a sketch that is then modified by the AI, if you pull out your phone and you go on my Instagram, and my Instagram is WJM Architect, go to my Instagram. There is I posted it just a day or two ago. It's obviously a pencil sketch that I did, and there's several other images. So as you swipe across, you can see the sketch I used to start with, and then there's 3 or 4 images of, based on the prompting, what the AI was able to do with my sketch. And that's the kind of stuff that you'll be able to do also. So I just wanted to throw that out there now, because some people might want to do that, Brian, as you're talking about these next steps.
In painting here, you can take an original image, a photograph. This one came off the top of the Google van. And as I was working on this store, and we were going to put the Rolex entrance over here on the original building, I wanted to show it to the clients without having to do all the drawings, without having to model the entire. I mean, I ended up modeling the building after I got the job, but I didn't want to have to model the whole building first, create the whole new entrance in Revit, and then render it overnight and then come back. It would take too long. I just put a mask over this. I just drew a white block around here, and then I ran several images and several different designs to get the new Rolex store entrance. Each image that I produced took about 4 minutes to do. 4 minutes, not 4 days, not 4 hours. That kind of productivity allowed me to do multiple options of this in painting to see what we could do for the entrance to the store. We could go from mild to wild. We could just try everything that we wanted to try. It's like a giant Pinterest board, but it's controlled by you. So it's not just getting something that's been done by somebody else before. You can actually have hyper control over what you want to do with each one of these options.
Yeah, and this is about the time in the presentation when we get a lot of people's full attention, because they start to see the possibilities of how they might use this in their own practice. to leverage their own creativity, to generate multiple iterations. Not all of them go to the client, but it allows you to explore lots of interesting options very quickly.
The first image is pixelated. It came from the top of the Google van. The second image is upscaled from the first image. The way that the AI does it is a little different than the way Photoshop has done it. We've been able to upscale things for a long time using different mathematical equations, bicubic or nearest neighbor. There's a few different ones in Photoshop that people are,
Interpolation.
that are familiar with. AI works differently. It adds noise into the spaces between the pixels when it upscales it, and then it uses the prompts and it fills in that noise with more likely data than just guessing from that small mathematical equation in Photoshop. It's an entirely new way where you can zoom in and enhance like this. Remember the movies with the zoom in on the license plate, now enhance. That was all BS before. It was impossible to do that. You couldn't get information from no information. We're not putting real information in there, but we're putting the most likely information that should be there in with the AI. So it is imagining how to upscale this, but it's imagining it in the most likely way for what's going to be there. Here's the image to image. This is probably the most powerful thing for us as architects to use, is because we can put our sketch, our design behind what we're trying to create. I want to show you some things that's just using pictures that started first before we get into some of the architecture stuff. That's my daughter, Amelia. There's the prompt, and you can see down here it says denoising strength 0.5. If I denoised at 0, I would get the same picture as Amelia over here. If I denoised at 1 or 100%, I'd get an entirely different picture that was based purely on this prompt here, with no control from Amelia. But this kind of power allows you to control very specifically how much of your image you want to use in the new image and how much creativity you want from the text prompting. So you can adjust back and forth exactly how much of the AI you want in your work.
Go back one again,
Sure.
Bruce. I'm sorry, Brian. Go back. The 50-year-old rock star image appeared after the words that are underneath. So this isn't a situation where we created the image and then we added these words underneath the image in order to describe it. These words, what you see underneath this image, were all that was used, plus the picture of Brian's daughter, to create that image. So,
And then there's the other, the model type deliberate V2
right.
is a checkpoint model that has hyperrealism in it. So we
Right.
knew that was going, there's the resolution for it. This here, I want to mention the seed. This random number here, seemingly random number here, they're the address or the descriptor of that random noise that we're adding. You can change this seed and you'll get it, everything else being the same, you'll get a different image. That seed is the amount or the type of noise that we're adding in and then subtracting away. If you wanted to reproduce this image exactly the way it is here, you would need the picture of Amelia, you would need the prompt, you need the negative prompt, you'd need the same number of steps, the exact same sampler, the exact same classifier free guidance scale, the exact same seed. Everything would have to be the same. If you changed one little part, the image would be different, vastly different, not just a little different. So that makes it very difficult to reproduce your work doing this or to copy anybody else's work. And that's kind of a benefit, but also it's a double-edged sword, let me say.
Right.
These
But
go ahead.
I was going to say, to get to this level of detail, you need a much more complicated interface than the phone apps that I gave you earlier. But the phone apps are a great place to start so that you can begin to get familiar with how this works and to see how you could possibly use it. Go ahead, Brian.
So there's Amelia and Amelia and Amelia and Amelia and Amelia. You can change so many different aspects of, and we were only using Amelia to show how many different ways you can try on different outfits, different ethnicities, different ages. There's a lot of options that you can do with this. I've started to try because somebody asked at AIA West, can we use this for building life cycling? I was like, well, if I can age humans, maybe I can age buildings. And I don't know how carefully we're going to do that because there's been some challenges. How many pictures do we have of the Empire State Building that are relatively equal in quality? So you're going to get a 1933 picture that's not going to have the same quality as a 2023 picture because of the photography technology.
You could also get a lot of dirty diners.
Yeah. Right now, how much is this going to cost? Right. We've talked a little bit about the hardware requirements, that it's really not that much for your computer. You can get on the phone and all of this stuff, but the time, the learning curve. It took me about 2 solid months to get good enough that I felt like I could start showing stuff on the internet. Before that, I wasn't able to really produce a lot of good things. Now, I didn't have guidance. I was shooting in the dark at a lot of this stuff. I'm really trying to learn on my own, and that's not really the best way. So if you have the opportunity, there's plenty of tutorials on the internet now where there weren't 10 months ago.
Right.
And I'm uncovering more and more tutorials every day. So I suspect the learning curve is going to be a lot faster for people now than it has been over the past 10 months. These are some of the images of AI generated stuff. Okay. We are ready for questions.
Here we go.
Hi, Ruchi.
Wow, thank you. Thank you for the wonderful presentation. I downloaded the two softwares that the two apps that you just mentioned, and I'm going to experiment them now.
Excellent.
We already have a couple of questions. The first one is from Brooke, and it's, if you use an image of another architect's work as a prompt, is there a concern about the copyright?
There's that ethical thing again. I'd be careful about doing that. If you input an image of someone else's work and you use prompts to modify it, at that point you're kind of modifying someone else's work. You have to be careful about doing that. Even if the image that's returned is substantially different, I think that there might be an ethical responsibility not to do that. That would be my opinion on that. I mean, Brian, what do you think about that? We hadn't gotten that question before.
I would avoid using a specific picture of a building and using that as the underlying image. I'd have less concerns if you wanted to create something that was purely text-based, but said something like in the style of Michael Graves, and then you got some yellow columns back. I wouldn't say that there's really copyright infringement in that situation, because you're in the style of isn't copying. And often architects are human Xerox machines anyway. Where did we get the ideas that we're creating our own work from? Like the stuff that's coming out of us with no prompting, no images, no text, the stuff that we're putting down on our own pieces of paper and boards, that came from somewhere. It came from our architectural or environmental autobiography, what we've seen, what we've lived in, where we've been, where we've gone. Think of Frank Lloyd Wright when he'd gone to Japan and then he came back and the architecture was transformed. It was different. Why? It wasn't because he got bumped in the head or anything like that. It's because of all the stuff he saw in Japan, right? He didn't suddenly change. He adopted a lot of the styles that he saw that he'd never seen before. And then he brought it back to America, and Americans hadn't seen it before. And it was really, really exciting.
Yeah, that's a good analogy.
Yeah,
That's a good analogy.
Think of these models as all of the world's stuff that we haven't seen before. And a lot of it is new and creative because it doesn't have to necessarily have been completely seen by the model to still be imagined by the model. So when Bill was talking before about tree bark and you get a dog barking at a tree, that's the model trying. trying to figure out what you want with your text prompt, and it'll keep doing that, and it'll very rarely return zero image, but you may not get exactly what you're wanting, and that's where you're getting to learn how to control this a little bit more and modify it and adjust it as it's going. But I'd be a little bit careful about copyrights when you're using a specific image or a specific drawing from somebody else. Or if I took Bill's front elevation of a house that he's working on, I snapped a picture surreptitiously in his office, and then I said, okay, look, now I'm going to modify it. Instead of using clapboard siding, I'm going to put shingle siding on it, and it's entirely different in mine now. Well, that's the same as Jimmy in architecture school stealing my design right off of my desk.
That's it, Brian. You can't come to my office anymore. That's it. It's all over now. All right. But I would round this out by saying that once you play around with this a little bit, you're not going to feel the need to input an image of someone else's work. You're going to want to put your own image in, or your own work, your own sketch in, because the amount of creativity that this unleashes is amazing.
Thank you.
That actually segues perfectly into the next question, which is, how does one train the application to create images in a style that's recognizable, a la Zaha Hadid? For instance, how do you train the AI model to produce repeatable stylistic images from a specific style?
Well, you don't really train the model. All right, go ahead, Brian.
I got this one. First of all, if it's a very, very popular architect that has a large body of work that has been photographed many, many times, it's likely already going to be in these models. However, these models can also benefit from something called fine tuning. And Google has an app called Dream Booth that allows you, with as little as 5 or 6 images, to create a fine tuning model that's used as another layer in this over the regular model. So if I've been adding in most of my prompts, Penschow architect designed, that's what I put in my prompt somewhere, because then nobody else is really going to copy my prompt, or they're not going to get the same images unless they're putting that in there. And if they do put that in their prompt, then I know they're stealing my work. So I always add my name into my prompts. I have not yet used Dream Booth to train one of these fine tuning models as another layer on top. But if you use Dream Booth, you can add images for whomever you want, or whatever style you want, to overlay on top of the regular model and get out what you want. Now, I'd recommend using your own style and overlaying your own images, but your own style will also come out through your prompting. You're going to develop that type of language that you're using to talk to the computer in a very unique, personal way. It just happens. And you see, even through the images that we presented tonight, the difference between Bill's style and my style. It comes out a little bit differently just through the prompting. If you add your own sketch in behind that more, it's going to become more yours too. But you can get Zaha Hadid over and over again if you want. Or
you can, if you want to do that. And I don't really know why you would want to do that, but I guess you could do that. But I would be careful, because I mean, we have to be ethical about how we're using and how we're producing these images. I don't know that I would be out there actually trying to reproduce a Zaha Hadid image.
You may want to do something really tricky, though, and blend Zaha's style with somebody else that's very different, and get some cross section of the two, because that
like
works
the
quite well.
celebrities.
Like smashing stuff together sometimes works. And you hadn't thought about, what if Zaha Hadid and Robert A.M. Stern got together and had an architectural baby? What would that look like, right? A deconstructivist shingle style Martha's Vineyard house. I don't know how that would really work.
That's definitely not safe for work.
I got something to do after this now.
Yeah, right.
So the next question we have is from Christina. How much time per day do you typically spend honing your prompting skills?
Well, I've been doing it now for about 10 months. I would say I spend, maybe 15 minutes or so with the prompting, seeing what comes out. But I've done it enough now that I have created, text files with a variety of prompting scenarios that will produce images in the range that I'm looking for. I do a lot of work in vernacular. So I'm looking at things like Victorian. I'm looking at things like shingle style, things like, maybe international style. I have strings of prompts that I have pre-saved that I use on sketches or images to produce a certain kind of range of outcomes. So, you'll learn that as you start to do more of this, you'll learn your own style of prompting. You might want to create and save, banks of prompts just so that you can reuse them in the future.
Right.
For me, I was trying to vault myself into expert status, so I've been working on it for 2 to 3 hours a day, every day for the past 10 months. And it just a little bit of learning and a little bit of practice every day has really, I feel, given me the extra time that I've needed to consume all the information that's out there. One of the problems is the information is coming faster than really any human alive can consume. There's every day there's a new thing released, a new possibility. Now we're having image blending going to, you could take several images and blend them together as a prompt rather than using words. There's a lot of opportunity in this area to focus narrowly on a set of skills, but I was trying to do this, understand all of it. So it just took a lot of extra time that I chose to put into it.
And now we have the clip pre-training of the libraries coming out now, so that the libraries will get better, so that the images will get better. They actually have something called CLIP. It's a contrastive language image pre-training. So those libraries actually come with better sets of prompts attached to them, so that they can produce better images for you. And it's very interesting software, and that's relatively new. But just in the last 10 months that we started this, the images have changed drastically. The libraries have expanded exponentially, because, as you use these apps, even the phone apps, your prompts and the images you get are going back into the company's library for that app. So you're using their app, but they're getting the benefit of your use is expanding their libraries. So it's kind of symbiotic right now, but that's what's going on. So every day it gets better and better.
So Bill, you mentioned that you try to save the prompts that you use for generating these images. Is that something like you keep on modifying that every time you make the image look better and better? Because every more time you spend on it, things get better with practice.
Well, yes, but you'll see with the phone apps, and even with some of the interface, there's a limit in how many prompts you can put in. So I'll start with a whole string of what I would call my standard prompts. And then I will, as the images come in, I'll go back and I'll modify those prompts until I get closer to what I'm looking for. And quite honestly, I mean, Brian is spending many hours a day doing this, and he's very on the technical side. I'm using mostly the phone apps and some of the interfaces that are available on my laptop. But I'm really only spending about 15 or 20 minutes a day, really honing my skills in terms of developing the prompts. And as you get better and better at it, you're going to see that, it speeds everything up so much. I mean, I use this now on projects. I'll do a concept sketch for myself so that I can begin to understand what the client is asking me to do. I'll scan that in and I'll run it through AI and see what the AI comes up with. It comes up with some really unexpected creative stuff. It's not thinking intelligently. It's just returning images from the library based on those prompts. But some of the stuff is really interesting, and it spurs even more creativity. And that's why I think for architects, this is particularly valuable to use. Yeah. But it's not time consuming unless you want it to be.
Let's see, the next question is, do you need to type in the steps and seed in the prompt box?
No, you do not. The steps are the number of iterations of noise removal. In some apps, they're fixed. You cannot control them. Different samplers, which are the tool that's used to solve all the differential equations, work differently with the number of steps. Some are better at removing noise faster, so you don't need as many steps. The more steps you have, the longer it takes to produce each image, because the sampler needs to solve all those differential equations for each step where it's removing the noise. The seed is usually randomly generated, but you can do it in steps to find them. So you can produce images that are one seed directly after the other and get a string that are very similar of images. But often the seed address, that number, is just used to try to recover a very specific image that you'd already created. It doesn't really matter which seed you put in there when you're starting off brand new. It can be completely random and completely random generated noise.
Bill, you want to add to it, or should I proceed with the next question?
I would just add to that, if you're a novice and you're starting out, and like I said before, I'm a quick early adopter of new technology. If I can't use it right away and I can't see the value in it right away, I don't use it. So if you're starting out with the phone apps, you don't have to worry about the seed. Just put the prompts in. You'd scan in a sketch or scan in a photo of a project that you've already done and play around with it and get familiar with it, because as the AI is incorporated into the other software that you use, you'll be much better able to use it because you'll understand much better how it works. So I don't really feel the need to get into the seed of the image the way Brian was describing. But if you want that, you can do that, and that's how you can create very similar images. You know?
Like the models are pre-trained, we're trying to pre-train all of you so you can get a few good wins under your belt with while this technology is in its infancy. And then you'll say, oh yeah, I have used this before. It is beneficial to me. And if you start to want to take a deep dive into it, you'll get into all those settings and you'll have more and more control as you go and as you learn.
We want you all ahead of the curve. We don't, as a profession, we don't want to be behind the curve. We want to be ahead of the curve. We want to be ahead of the engineers and the other professionals that are involved in building design. You know, we want to command this and utilize it in a way that benefits our clients. We want to add value to our firms. AI is going to help you to add a lot of value to your firm. And you know, we want to get as many of our colleagues out there using this as we can. That's really why we're giving this seminar, this talk, is we want you to use it so that you can get better at using it, because this is the future.
Thank you. The next question we have is from Felix. How do you think AI will be integrated into Revit? Or do you think Autodesk will build up Forma with AI, since Revit is now 20-year-old code?
I think
it'll be an add-on.
They're going to add it on to every image generation, every drafting, everywhere is going to be in Microsoft Paint. It's already in Adobe Photoshop. It's going to be in Revit. They'll probably even stick it in AutoCAD as a module that you can use. I don't know how beneficial it's going to be in AutoCAD, but maybe they'll put it there. It's because it's node-based and it's library-based, it's outside of the regular program. It doesn't need to be integrated into that software to work with the software. It will dovetail nicely into almost anything that produces images. You're going to find it in your camera apps on the phone soon. When you take a picture of yourself, it's going to automatically enhance for you. They already have these filters on the TikToks and Snapchat. That is basically this kind of thing where it's overlaying different images onto a video or a picture of you already. So it's being integrated into everything in a way that almost boiling the frog, that we haven't noticed isn't that cute? Snapchat can do that. They're conditioning you already to accept this new world order with AI in it.
The conspiracy theory, yeah, but
a little bit.
But those filters and such are a form of AI, but they came out with a lot of those filters because they were using the filters and people using the filters in their apps like Instagram and some of the others. They're using that to create libraries. They're creating more and more images that can be used in more and more AI applications. So every time you use one of those filters, you're helping Silicon Valley to develop a stronger AI library system.
The next question's from Anthony. Have you experimented with using this to make images other than perspectives, i.e. rendered elevations or floor plans?
Yes, I've done that. Yeah, you can do that. You just have to make sure that you control it in the prompts.
The elevations, it works great at.
Yeah,
The floor plans, it's awful at.
yes.
It does not understand anything about it'll make a picture of a floor plan that is absolutely useless because it doesn't understand space planning. It doesn't understand the program. It doesn't understand adjacencies. It
Right.
doesn't even understand what the width of a corridor needs to be. It doesn't understand anything about the codes. So when it comes to you, somebody once said the plan is the generator, right? That's what we need. Corbu, we need the plan to generate these things. The computer doesn't understand that it's going to be generating a three-dimensional space from that two-dimensional picture of the floor plan. So what it does is it takes a look like it did with falling water or like it does with human hands at all of the floor plans that it's ever seen. And then it just sort of blends them together and you get nothing that's useful.
Yeah.
Now that's this. There are floor plan generating softwares and AI type programs out there. None of them are free. None of them are open source. They're kind of in Silicon Valley, still trying to be produced properly. I've talked to one company in Israel that will turn around in 24 hours a floor plate that you give them with a space layout based on your programming needs. And they'll give you 3 options to pick from that their AI will further refine. It's all within their own company. They're getting pretty good at putting the parameters in, but I asked them, what about the codes? And they said, oh, we haven't gotten there yet. So you're getting back, you're paying for this stuff, and then you got to send it on to a code consultant to go check everything that the AI is doing, or go through it yourself. I wouldn't send it to a code consultant.
But what Brian just said is very important. I know a lot of people, last night we had a lot of people who were afraid that their clients were going to get a hold of AI and then wouldn't need them anymore. The AI is not an architect. The AI doesn't have your training, doesn't have your experience. It can't put together a building the way an architect can, but you can leverage the technology to your use. But your client is not going to be able to do that. They may be able to generate a pretty picture of what they think they want, but they're still going to need you to diagram it, analyze it, and structure it and integrate it properly into real building materials. The AI can't do that. Now, will it be able to do that at some point? I think it's a long time before that will happen. So you're not going to lose the profession to lay people through AI because it just doesn't, it's not an architect. You're the architect. Use the AI to leverage your creativity to the benefit of your client, but don't worry that you're going to be replaced.
So that brings up to the next question from Bruce. He's talking about the floor plans. It says, can it produce floor plans or suggest alternatives or prompted modifications to a floor plan that has already been drawn by you? Similarly, can it place furniture in the floor plan or suggest alternates for layouts of furniture based on layouts that have already been drawn by you?
I haven't done that yet.
Yeah, not these diffusers. They're not capable of discerning or deciding that these things are spaces. They're just trying to reproduce an image based on that text. You can color a floor plan. You can take a site plan and you can make it really, really pretty and keep all of the information that you drew on that site plan. So that those beautifully rendered marker site plans that you see at the planning board meetings and stuff like that, you could do one of those in 4 minutes with this and make it look fantastic.
Yeah.
But the AI won't know anything about the number of parking spaces or the required lighting or the tree protection, or it just won't, the siting of the building. It can't suggest better siting of the building. It won't know the sun paths. It just can't get there yet because it's only diffusing noise to an imagined image.
Next question from Steve. Bill kind of touched on this a minute ago, but have you had issues with your tech savvy clients taking your designs and using AI to make changes to your work?
Not yet.
It's
not easy to do.
I don't have I don't have clients that are this tech savvy. You know, even my computer scientist friends and clients, they understand more so than I do the math behind this, but they're tech people. And the real reason that architects are so great at or at the native for this technology is it's a combination of that technology plus the art and the artistic side of it. And those tech savvy clients that I have, they don't understand the proportioning systems. They don't understand color and composition. They don't understand what makes a good piece of art. They're the ones kind of scratching their head. Why did they have an art museum? I don't understand even why people want to look at this stuff. Let me go tap on my computer. So we're kind of at that intersection between that technology and the artistic side of it. We've been trained in those areas extensively, and most people haven't. So we take it a lot for granted because we're already here. We know what it's like to have an architect's brain.
This technology is going to enable you to really demonstrate your value to the client, because you will be able to produce imagery quickly and go through new ideas and creative ideas much more quickly than you could do without this technology. That is really going to allow you to demonstrate value to clients for certain. And they're going to need you. This is not going to replace you.
The next question is, it's an interesting question. How do you see the future AI integration into BIM beyond visualization and renderings? And I would like to maybe add to this, do you see something that you can use these softwares for spec writing or helping you in CD production?
That's a two-part question. I'll take the first part. I see it being integrated as modules that will be add-ons to something like Revit. And there might be different add-ons of AI to do different things. You might have an electrical add-on, a mechanical add-on, a structural add-on. Some of this already exists in the Revit, but AI is going to make it faster and more efficient. I don't know if it'll necessarily make it more accurate. We'll have to see. But that's how I see Autodesk integrating this in, at least into Revit. Brian, you want to talk about specs?
Upcodes just introduced AI into their platform, so you can ask it a question and it'll return answers based on the codes and show you what the answers are. We used to rely on friends and colleagues to do this kind of stuff, and now you can ask the software and it can do pretty well at what it's trying to do. The concern is still the accuracy of it. And if you're not telling it exactly which code that you're supposed to be in, it's not going to know your jurisdiction. There's still some things that it's weak in. People have been trying to replace independent spec writers for, I don't know, 30 years now with technology. And we were promised that the specs were going to be integrated into Revit. And I really tried hard to do that with a Keynote file and integrate the keynotes to tagging the materials, to tagging them to my spec sections in Revit. It doesn't work very well yet. I'm not saying it's never going to be there, but it might be another 30 years that you're going to keep having to hire me as an independent spec writer. And I just say that because the way a building goes together, and we're changing things with new technologies and new requirements for energy codes and things like that, still requires somebody that has that overall knowledge of how the entire building goes together. And AI tends to work in very small parts and very small pieces. Even the chat GPT is limited to its input and its output. It just doesn't have the kind of capacity for a memory that a human brain does. You can get it to check every assembly that you put together for NFP 285 compliance. It could be very limited to that and do that very well. But then if you're asking it to check plaza waterproofing at the same time, the NFPA 285 compliant thing won't know anything you're talking about waterproofing because it hasn't been trained on that, doesn't understand it. To train one of these AIs like we're trained, it's going to be required to be as big as a human brain. 86 billion neurons and 86 billion non-neuronic cells at the same time firing together to create the kind of creativity that we have. And we're not perfect. We're messy. We're humans. We make mistakes all the time. So to ask the computer, which doesn't have the capability that we have to be perfect at it, is just asking a turtle to run up a tree. It's
You don't
not
want
possible.
creativity is messy. You don't want perfect. You want
Yeah.
you want to use this technology, at least for now. And again, the reason why we're giving this presentation is because we think everybody should be at least playing around with this stuff. You know, get familiar with it, be ahead of the curve. We want the profession to be ahead of the curve.
I've been lately using the AI version of Upcodes, and I've been loving it. It's so detailed. It brings you codes from mechanical, gas code, everything. Like you ask a question to your coworker and you get the answer. Now it's on you to investigate and cross-check. It gives you it feeds you with all the stuff, but we have to cross-check all those things there before we use them.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, because it does make mistakes. There was a recent case where there was an attorney had filed a brief and he had used the ChatGPT to write the brief, and the ChatGPT, because it's not a lawyer, made up all kinds of case law that were used to back up the brief. And of course, he files the brief with the court. The opposing attorney gives it to his clerks, or gives it to his paralegals, and they're looking for these cases. These cases don't exist. So they go to the judge, and the judge has his clerk look for these cases. The cases don't exist. He said to the lawyer, "Where did you get these cases from?" And he goes, ChatGPT. So it makes mistakes. It makes things up. You have to check this stuff. As a professional, you would do it anyway. You check the drawings before they go out of your office. It's the same kind of a thing. But the joy of this is you get so incredibly creative and go through so much so quickly that it just really adds a lot of value to your services and your workflows and everything. So I'm pleased. I want everybody doing this.
Let's see. Oh, William Brown says, great presentation. Brian and Bill, thanks for sharing.
Oh, thank you.
Go to the next one. Ron asks, did you start with the free version of Stable Diffusion, then move to the upgraded subscription versions? Any advice on when to upgrade and which versions to use for image-to-image architecture concepts?
Now, that's kind of a hybrid question, Brian. What do you got for that?
For me, everything that I'm using is free. I believe in open source software, and all of my stuff is hosted on my machine. It's downloaded here. All the images I produce, I keep here. Everything is mine. And I wanted it that way because I didn't want Midjourney owning my images. I didn't want DALL-E owning my images or my prompts, or taking them and sharing them with other people and putting them online as examples of what you can do with their software. I mean, you can call me a control freak if you want, but the legal issues of it is I want to have everything here so nobody can come then and say, you know, this is ours, not yours. And I'd have to get into a fight over it. So everything I have is the free version. There is no upgraded versions of mine. The comfy UI, the automatic 1111 can all be found on the internet, downloaded. You can do the same thing. If you're going to use a platform on the internet, though, there are options for upgrading, and Bill, you can talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, like I said before, I want to adopt new technology where there's not a huge time commitment to learn how to use it, and it produces value right away. That's really been my yardstick, throughout my career in terms of adopting, new technology and advances in technology. So I'm less concerned about that than Brian is. I have a $10 a month subscription to these phone apps, and I use the phone apps. And the images that are created, I use in my work, but I don't use the images in their entirety. I'm not concerned about, Midjourney owning the image I created, because I'm using that image to create a Revit computer model, and I'm rendering it in Lumion. So what I create is mine. I'm creating it separate from the image. I'm just using the image for basic inspiration. So by doing it that way, I don't have the same concerns that Brian has. Now, that may change in the future as it gets more powerful and I'm able to do more with it. I may be concerned that some of the images that I'm creating are not mine, and I want them to be mine, in which case I'm going to go pay a visit to Brian, and he's going to load his computer stuff onto my computer.
The next question we have is, can you tweak one element in an image? For example, a stair is generated with a natural oak railing, but you want to see it stained ebony instead, while leaving the rest exactly the same. I think the answer would be how better your prompts are, right?
Well, usually
efficient.
in the phone apps, in the online stuff, it's very, very challenging to do, but it is absolutely possible to do when you get a little bit more control over it. You can mask out that railing,
Right.
and then you can rerun the system with 50 different materials for the railing, and you'll get the exact same image, but the railing will be different every time. So I had posted an artwork image of Bill in his studio drawing, and his collar was open, and somebody says, "Where's the bow tie?" In 5 minutes, I put a bow. I did 7 or 8 different bow tie images, and I put the bow tie right on them. Same exact image, but the bow tie was on there then. So
yeah, my wife liked that image
Yeah.
of me.
it's quite possible to do exactly what. So I had a bunch of different color bow ties also, and I picked the best out of the bunch to put in there. So I could
You
try.
did.
Yeah, and you can do this over and over again. You can generate different images. You can switch out windows. You can keep what you like in Paint and change what you don't.
It's much harder to do that in the apps, like Brian said. I'm not trying to do things like that yet. I mean, if I wanted something like that, I would incorporate the ideas of the image into my Revit model, and I would use my Revit model to run through the various materials that would go into the railing details. At least that's the way I would approach it right now. Because I'm also looking to create documents to communicate design to a contractor. I'm not really going to do that through the phone apps in AI. Not yet.
Kristen asked, I was wondering if most of the architectural images shown today were generated by Wonder, Dream, or another AI program.
Well, we can, Brian, do you have the folder that I gave you with the images that I created?
I think I do. Let me see if I can pull it up.
I think it was called Good Images as opposed to the bad images.
Just pull up the presentations. Oh no, I don't. I'm sorry.
Oh, you don't have that.
I don't
Okay.
have it. It's on the flash drive. Then I don't have
It was on the flash drive. All right. Well, I have it now. How do I get that up on the screen here?
Maybe I can pull it up. Let me see. We can switch to. I can stop sharing and then you can share.
Okay. So now I got to go to screen share. Share screen. But I've got to let me open the app. Open the file first. Well, bear with me for a second. Okay. Now let's see if I can share the screen. All right. Okay, can you see that?
Yes.
Okay. There's a series of images that were all created with the phone apps. Now, this is there's not a lot of images here. There's only 28, but I've done thousands of them. And some of these down at the bottom here, one of them is actually Brian's, or 2 of them are actually Brian's. But the rest of them are all different styles of architecture prompted by me through these phone apps. I'll flip through them here. This one was actually created by a project that I had done, a concept project for a beach house. I fed the basic imagery into the model, and it produced an ocean scene with rocks around the house design that I created. Here you see something that's more traditional in appearance with the porch and the columns. Different colors. You can use red siding, gray siding, green, blue. More modern details, flatter roofs. There's all kinds of things that you can do with the phone apps to create different styles. And here's a split level, which took us a while to get to, but we were able to get there. Again, some more modern. Here's the cars. I was able to get the Ferraris in this one. And then here's even, it can get to be very creative depending on the prompts that you put in. It's more traditional again. So you see there's a lot that you can do even just with the phone apps. So Brian, you can take control back now. I hope that answered the question.
We have the next question, and somebody is asking, can we use the existing building photographs in stable diffusion without masking or boxing to create an addition or an alteration, similar to the Rolex entry exterior, but just using the text prompts?
That's in painting. Brian, you want to explain how to mask and how to replace?
You can, I'm trying to wrap my head around this question. Just give me a moment.
You want to take
Use
an existing building
building photographs
and add an addition to it
without masking
yeah.
or boxing. So I don't think it's really going to work that well. The idea when you put an image to image, you're using that original image as the latent space. You're going to add noise to that, and then you're going to take noise away. If you can't control where that's happening in the image unless you're masking it. Unless you're putting that mask of, that's telling the computer, the software, this is where you're going to work. Now the mask can either be, you can in paint inside the mask, or you can mask off what you like and in paint outside of the mask. But the mask is the information that you're telling the computer, this is where I want the new thing to be. So that's why you want to use the mask. You can use different masks. It doesn't have to be drawn on. You can use another image as a mask, or create a mask from another image and then overlay that onto your image and use that as the mask. And you're going to in paint or the inside or outside that. So you can use another image as a mask. That's a possible thing. But think if you've ever done anything in Photoshop, the idea of masking is very similar to what it's done in Photoshop.
Actually, playing off that, I'm super interested in the building with the Rolex storefront. Can you share how to create this kind of addition? I think that sort of piggybacks off of that same topic.
Brian, that's the in painting again.
Right. It is exactly the same topic. You start with your picture, you'll put it into the box, and they'll ask you to where you want to mask it. And I draw my mask. It's just, I'm pretty good at drawing, but you can do other ways to do it. Once you've done that, you're going to take your prompting boxes and put in what you want to see in the positive prompt, what you don't want to see in the negative prompt. And then you're going to run a batch of images. You're going to see different images come up based on what seed you're feeding in. So if you feed 5 different seeds in, you'll get 5 different images out. They'll all be relatively similar because you haven't changed your prompt. If you want vastly different images, you're going to change your prompt too. So if you want to change your style, your objects, your concepts about that, you'll change your prompting too.
Colors, you can change colors. There's a lot of things you can do.
Right. And we are planning future courses about this,
Yes.
where we're going to be talking about how to get good at prompting. And we're going to talk about how to do this in painting and upscaling and really use the tools that are available to us. This presentation was not about the details of how to, but more about what it is and how it works.
We'll be
And to
looking
get
forward to that.
you all started on it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we'll be looking forward for your presentation number 2. And I think by then everybody would be at least they'll experiment how this works. Frank
Yes.
is asking, as the first step to start to gain some proficiency, what would you recommend? Just play around with the phone app or some other thing in general, a general approach?
I would say start with the phone app and take baby steps. Play around with it. You're going to get some amazing stuff back. You're not going to believe what you can get from a phone app. It's just crazy.
There's going to be some tutorials on the web too. So after you get a little successes and you experiment, you can go right to something like stablediffusionart.com. And these tutorials on the web have as little or as much information as you really want to consume about it. You can, I would warn against going down a deep hole into this stuff, because it gets more exciting as you're reading it. And then next thing you know, 72 hours are gone and you're like, tapping at the computer like a crazed person trying to create images because of all the information that's out there. It's hard to stop consuming this because it gets exciting when you start to see what you can do.
And we can start with the free app first and then take the paid subscription.
Yeah, and if you find yourself getting too deep into it, contact Brian and myself, and we'll talk you down off the ledge.
Brian, did you mention stablediffusionart.com?
Yes.
For the videos?
Yeah, just type Stable Diffusion Art into the and tutorials into the it's written by a guy with a PhD in computer science, and he also enjoys art very much. So it's very informative about how all of this stuff works.
Yeah, and you have to also understand a lot of these companies that are working on these various programs, they refer to the images as art. We're architects, we're looking for images of buildings and we're looking to manipulate those images. But just about all of the companies are referring to these as image generating, art generating. And they don't just do buildings, they do all kinds of artwork. I mean, you can do graphic design with this. You can do, it's unlimited.
You can check out my Facebook page or my Instagram. I'm taking a deep dive into the fine art production of this too, and really kind of stretching where it can go with fine art abilities. I like to take that talent that I can develop in the fine art world and then adapt it to architecture.
Even with the phone apps, you can do that. You can create art. You can make a sketch of something or a watercolor that you've done, import it in, and use the prompts to manipulate your own artwork. It's amazing what you can produce. The images are just fascinating.
Along that vein, is there any AI application right now that can create 3D models from a prompt?
Yes, there is. It will create from a single 2D image. It's kind of a loopback system. You create your 2D image or your perspective view, like the one that I have up on the screen right now. It can take this and then see the same model from multiple viewpoints. It'll turn it into a 3D model. They started doing it with cartoon characters first. That's what they thought would be the most useful for the industry. So they would develop a character and then turn it into a 3D cartoon character and then animate that 3D cartoon character, then make it talk. And then now you have, instead of drawing this out, you have a tool that can create video animations in 3D cartoon characters.
Yeah, but is it, Brian, you're a little ahead of me on this one. Is it vector based? I mean, is it producing a 3D
It's
model?
not producing a model that you can use in your work. It's producing a model that you can turn around and see from multiple angles.
Yeah.
So it is getting an idea that this is a 3-dimensional object rather than a 2-dimensional picture. And then you can get multiple viewpoints of it. It's not useful for you yet, but it's trending in that direction, because then the next step out of that is going to be able to turn it into a vector-based model eventually. We need to get that level where now we take a 2D image, we slap it into Revit, we draw over it. But it's the same idea of like these point clouds from the LiDAR scanners. When you get that point cloud, you bring it in, it's a 3-dimensional image. We'll eventually be able to get that drawn by the computer. So we're getting there. This is at its infancy, and I'd love to be ahead of the curve each step of the way. The moment they release that for Revit, I'm going to try it. I'm gonna try it.
I'm gonna be there before you.
Many people are saying thank you, Bill. Thank you, Brian. Going back to the next question, have you experienced using Adobe Firefly? If yes, would you recommend it? What differences between the two mobile app and the Adobe Firefly? And thank you for the presentation.
You're welcome, and I don't know anything about Firefly.
Me neither. I have not tried it yet.
Sorry. Now I've got something to do tomorrow.
There's always something to learn.
I think we're at the last question on the list here from Bruce. Can you turn an existing rendering into a different style of presentation, such as converting a photorealistic model into a watercolor?
Oh, yes.
Absolutely.
That's easy to do.
I can take your existing model and set it on fire too. This
Yeah,
is
which,
one of the
yeah,
I've
Brian
done
likes
this-
burning down my buildings. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, people were so proud of their AI artwork, and I was just setting everybody's designs on fire because I could.
Yes.
And then I got chastised about it. I stopped. But you can put
Yes.
it into a field of snow. You can take
Mm.
a building and put it on a mountaintop. You can change the grass to gravel. There's a lot of different ways you can do it. You can take a line art sketch and turn it into a photorealistic rendering.
Yeah.
You can go the other way. You can turn them. Check out my Facebook page. There's a lot of different things that you can do in terms of styles of changing the artwork while keeping the same exact image there. It's a
Yeah.
little bit like that picture of my daughter turned into 9 different young girls.
You know, this question reminds me of a question we got last night, Brian, about, you know, level of detail at various stages of presenting to clients or to groups of people.
Yes.
We had someone last night who was very concerned that the AI was so exact and so detailed that their clients or let's say a planning board or such would get so focused on the details that they would kind of, you know, lose the whole general concept and how buildings are developed. And Brian and I pointed out that you could produce imagery in various art styles. So you could produce an image that looks like a watercolor of the initial concept of your building design that's much more loose, so that the client can absorb the whole and not get caught up in the gutters and the leaders and the details of the image. So it's possible to do that. You can also do intermediate steps. You go with something very loose, and then you can go with something that's more like a line sketch with some color. And then after that, you can go into full renderings or partial renderings, or, you know, whatever detail level you want that works best with your workflow. And the reason why that's important is that's where you can then really demonstrate your value to a client, planning board. You'll be able to control how the image is perceived by the person looking at it through AI. So this is, again, another a very valuable aspect to this technology. And we got that question last night. It dovetails into what we were just talking about. Brian, do you have something to add?
Yeah, one of my fears has been for a long time, and this first came to me from Revit, where I produced such a photorealistic image early on in, I think, 2008, that the client had this idea concretized in their brain. It has to be this way. And the zoning board wouldn't allow it. Things had to change, but they said, oh, it had to be this way. Since then, I had not been presenting any photorealistic type renderings to clients early on.
Right.
I was going very loose, very sketchy, and rendering it to be a pretty picture, but not photorealistic, because I didn't want them to concretize those ideas in their brain until we got to the point where it was completely evaluated and we knew that it could be built exactly the way we picked all the materials, and their budget supported what they wanted to do. Because a lot of these things, we look at this and we're like, that's a beautiful picture. We don't do the calculation of what it costs to build that immediately just looking at the picture. Well, when it turns out that you need this gold tinted glass and this stone veneer and the cast stone water tables, the client's budget falls apart when you're saying this is going to be a $2.4 million house to build. Like, wait, what? I thought it was just a pretty picture. Why can't make it cheaper now? But I want the same look.
Yeah.
I want the same look, but make it cheaper now. That's, you put yourself in that position as the architect, and I don't like doing that to myself. Now, if I rendered this picture in an artistic style, there's nobody's going to say that that has to be real stone and that has to be cast stone and that has to be bronze glass. There's, I can, oh, it was the sun reflecting off the glass. It's not bronze glass, it's regular glass. It was just the sun reflecting off of it in my
Right.
art picture. There's a lot of things you can do to explain away why you didn't meet their budget with the pretty picture that you just produced. So that's a
Right.
little pitfall that I want to avoid.
Right, but you can control that by selecting the art style library that
Mhm.
matches up with what you're trying to achieve at that particular moment with the client. So if you're early on, like Brian's talking about, you're early on, you're in the concept stages, you're going to want to use a looser style, like a watercolor style, or even an oil painting style, something that is, less, as Brian said, concretized in the mind of the client, so that you can, keep your avenues of creativity open to being able to achieve the client's goals of, a budget, function, as well as aesthetics.
We have lots of thank yous for both of you. Everybody's saying thank you for the great presentation, exciting stuff. We have a great icebreaker. One last question I see from Josh. Does the AI program own the copyright, or do you?
Oh, this is a great
There we go.
question. And like every great answer though, from a lawyer, it depends. It depends on
Right.
what the end user licensing agreement is with the software that you're using. So if it's on an app on the phone, they have an end user licensing agreement that nobody ever reads. They just say accept.
Right.
In there, it'll say who owns what, right? Like on Pinterest, when you put your stuff out there, you actually own it. Pinterest doesn't. On Facebook, it's different. It
Right.
depends on what the end user license is. Now, the software that I've downloaded, Stable Diffusion, and the ones that I use have an open source MIT license. So I own the all the images and everything that I've produced. It's not true for Midjourney.
Right.
Midjourney through Discord owns every image that you produce. They also own all of your prompts that you give them. So you can
Yeah,
download
and
the image and you can use it, but they own it.
a lot of the phone apps run on a DALL-E and another system called Crayon. You're not going to own the copyright, but I wasn't concerned about that because I'm not looking to directly use the images. I'm using the images indirectly to leverage my own creativity. So I'm less concerned about that, but that will become more of a concern in the future. I will say this though, and we had this come up last night as well. If you're going to use the phone apps, or if you have a bigger interface or more advanced interface like Brian, if you're going to create AI images, from an ethical standpoint, you need to disclose that it's an AI created image, even if you own the copyright, because you're not directly creating it. You're creating it with prompts, and the computer is actually creating the image. There's been some problems lately. I don't know if you've noticed, if you read the news, you pull up an article on your computer, it'll give you the name of the journalist, and then sometimes in the print underneath the journalist's name, it'll say AI was used to assist in the creation of this article. They had to start doing that because some of the really big name journalistic enterprises out there were using ChatGPT to compose articles and save time in creating their product. They weren't disclosing it, and there were some mistakes, and they kind of got caught with their pants down. So as an architect, anytime I post, and you'll see this on my Instagram and Facebook and everything, anytime I post an AI generated image, I identify it as having been an AI generated image prompted by WJM Architect, or prompted by Bill Martin. So I'm taking ownership of the prompts, but I'm letting people look who see that image know that that's an AI image that is not a completely uniquely created WJM Architect design or rendered image.
I
think it's
identify it
important.
the same way. I also think that the reason behind this is many people want to pay you for your effort and not for your value. So they assume that if you're creating this rendering, you're spending a certain number of hours that would take an average person to draw or paint or create this image in some way other than using something that does it in 4 minutes. So they might feel cheated if the quality is there, but the effort from you isn't, right? So you didn't spend 4 weeks on this. Why am I paying you thousands of dollars for it? That kind of idea behind that. Now, as we get away from that and we get more towards the value basis, there's going to be less concern as people start realizing that this art is painting with words rather than painting with a brush. It's going to be a little bit more relaxed. And when people realize that it's not something that everybody can do easily, you need some training, you need some experience, you need some practice at this to get good at it, just like every other art medium. I had somebody ask me today, where can I go to shortcut all of this? I don't want to spend
Right.
any time learning on Mid Journey. I don't want to spend any time learning on, I just want to get as good as you tomorrow.
Yeah.
Now, how do you expect to do that? You know, like this has
Yeah.
been 10 months, 3 hours a day learning how to do this. You're not going to get that good. There's really no substitution for experience and learning and trying and experimenting. And through that learning, this medium, you'll develop your own style. You'll develop your own ways and tricks and tips of doing it that are going to be useful to you as the designer, as the artist. And
Yeah.
that's really kind of where it's at.
That's where it's at. And I would just advise everyone listening to me that if you're going to utilize this technology, we need to maintain very high ethical standards as a profession. So I think you should keep that in mind as you're using this technology. Identify, if you're going to use it, you're going to post it to social media, it's fine. Identify it clearly as an AI generated image prompted by such and such architect. That's fine. Because if we lose the ethics in adopting this technology, there's a danger that goes along with that. And I just think as we become more familiar with it, more comfortable with it, we need the public to know that we're behaving in an ethical manner. We need the people who create these programs to know that we're using it in an ethical way.
And there's absolutely no reason to be deceptive about it. There's no
Right.
shame in using this technology or anything like. It's just a faster way of producing the same quality images that we're going to need to show our clients. And it is somebody had said last night, it is a really substitute for your clients ripping pages out of magazines. Because they come to you with all those magazines, draw this for me. Now we can show them something that is actually a little bit more constructible, a little bit more beneficial towards what they really need than what Home and Gardens magazine is showing them through photographs of somebody else. That's all happen. That's how we get our inspiration too, is through Pinterest and all these other options that the clients, I like this. And I've always given my clients is that please show me what you do like, and also show me pictures of what you don't like.
That's exactly right.
I've had this process in place for 13 years now. This is the way that I kind of work. The positive prompt and the negative prompt is exactly what I was asking my clients to show me by ripping pages out of magazines. And now I have the ability to show them. All I have to interview them, and I have a really good sense of coming back and getting what they want with this machine now. I'm the translator of what they want into the machine.
So it's 9 o'clock now, so I guess
Yes.
our introduction was great and coming to an end, but I'm sure I speak for all of the attendees. I think we're all looking forward to, the continuation and learning more from you guys. So thank you very much, and everybody have a good night.
Thank you for
You're
having
all
us.
very
Thanks, sir.
welcome. Thank you for listening. Good
Great.
night.
Good night, everybody.
Have a good night.
Good night.